Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather forecast brought to you by Ag South Farm Credit. Well, first of all, I just want to make a quick note. I'm recording this on Friday. I want to make a slight adjustment in our forecast here, and for two reasons. One, to be honest with you, my family kind of asked if I could stop working on Sunday. I usually spend a lot of my day Sunday preparing for forecasts. One of the big ones I prepare for is yours, and I just thought I would kind of honor their wishes to kind of back off a bit on that. The second part is, to be honest with you, my best forecasts each week are typically on Friday, and I have the most information that I've gotten to watch all week long and see the evolution of things, and as a result, I tend to just have better long-range content on Friday. And plus, because my videos are long form, some of them are 20 plus minutes long, I figured if you had something on Friday that you could watch over the weekend, it gives you a better idea on what to plan. Now, as I was saying all that, I'm staring at a satellite image from yesterday. This would have been on Thursday. Watched a deep low curl up over the north central plains, some severe weather that actually caused a ground stop in air traffic in Chicago's O'Hare, and a deep low that rolled through parts of Arizona, dumping a bunch of snow into place. But what I'm most fascinated by, to be honest with you, is this. This is the piece of the subtropical jet which continues to dominate our pattern. And I want to be watching for where that's going to be going. So what am I going to cover in this video? I'm going to cover both the near-term temperature and precipitation forecast. We're then going to talk a bit about the medium term, what we're looking at for February into early March. And then I'm going to have a discussion with you about some brand new stuff that just came out for the long range. And that's going to take us all the way to summer. So we've got a lot packed into this. So let's go ahead and get into it. And I mentioned there was some severe weather. And yeah, it was all right up here in parts of the Midwest. But first tornado actually ever observed in Wisconsin, since we've been keeping records which go back to the 1950s. And I just want to point out on the back side of this, this has dumped a lot of snow into parts of the West here. Just this one last system. Now, this isn't even including the two monster systems that came before this. But I want to show you kind of broader numbers here. So let's just think about what this winter's done. Let's get a quick recap of it. This is season to date percent of normal snow. And as you look at it, we have been out of the flow. We've not had enough cold air timed with moisture to give us snow in Ag South territory, which overall, I think most of us are like, good, keep the stuff away. But I want you to note a couple of other areas, like this whole section of the Ohio Valley and the Missouri Valley. While the Mid-South has been hit, and we've hit hard this section here of the Western Corn Belt, the Northern Plains, Upper Midwest have missed as well. And while numbers are recovering in the West still needs more. Now, I want you to think about a couple of things here when we just look at snowpack across the Western United States. I do want to show you this. This is important for us to understand because there are things that we grow in the Southeast that do compete with stuff that happens in the West. I mean, remember, California leads the nation in the production of over 40 different fruits and vegetables. And right now, through the Sierra Nevada into the Great Basin, down here into parts of the Southern Rockies, we've got good snowpack. Where we don't have it is up north. And if you're curious, the Colorado River right now is at 94% of average snowpack on it, meaning that western mountain water resources coming from snow are in halfway decent shape. We need more, but we're in decent shape. What I want to get to is this. Since the beginning of this new year, there's really only 3 spots in the country that have missed out. The biggest one is the Northern Plains and Upper Midwest. The reason? No strong polar branch of the jet. There's this area over in Texas and New Mexico that's missed as well. A lot of cotton grown here. We need to get more moisture. We're about to get some, but they needed more. But take a look at this. If I just draw a line right there and you get into this side of North and South Carolina, we have missed out on several of these events. And we've gone over drier here. Now, we've not yet shown up on the drought monitor. This is the newest drought monitor. I have it in this view because I want to do a comparison for you, but we're not on the drought monitor right now. But if we just slide this back to where we were at the beginning of the year versus now, there's been some major drought reduction. That's the point I want to make with this. Some major drought reduction overall across the United States. We're down to about less than a third of the country in some form of drought now. But it is important to note that the dryness that's been experienced in the coastal Carolinas is now showing up in the root zone soil moisture maps. And while we've seen major reduction in the deficits that have been in the Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Tennessee Valley, the Missouri Valley, we've watched this one, right over here, this area, getting drier in that subsurface soil moisture. That is going to be an important area to see fill in. Now, I have good news. I've got moisture coming that direction. But to be honest, this has been an area that's been over forecast for rainfall and under delivered. We need to just keep that in the back of our minds as we kind of walk forward in this forecast. Very quickly, I do want to let you know that the Mississippi River has made a pretty astonishing recovery. This morning it was at 21, almost 22 feet above low stage. Remember, just 15 days ago it was 2 feet below low stage. So pretty big recovery there. And part of that has been prompted by pretty wild swings in temperature. Now you're saying, what do you mean? Well, we had a bunch of snow in this area in mid-January. Well, all that's melted and come down the river. So if you're curious what's happened after the last big Arctic outbreak, which ended around January 19, 2021, somewhere in that time frame, well, since then to February 8th, most of the United States has gone back into being controlled by cold air getting locked into Alaska, locked into Greenland, and subtropical flow just flooding the United States with more mild conditions than colder. So in the past 132 years, everywhere that's got the number 1 in it is having their warmest end of January, start of February on record. Now, you know that I've been concerned about colder air arriving after Valentine's Day. I've got a new narrative on that to help you understand what's going to happen here. But there is a cold front that's trying to get to us, but it's going to take a long time. Colder air is starting to slide through the midsection of the country where temperatures have been knocked back 10, 20 degrees. But we've got a whole lot more mild days ahead of us here because we're still tucked under a relatively larger ridge. Now, what we're going to wait on are the combination of these 4 little short waves and this. As this digs into this short wave, it's going to kick off a system that's going to go straight from Texas to the mid-Atlantic. And we're going to get to open up the Gulf and start to retrieve some moisture out of this. Remember, this whole winter for you, has been about reducing drought risk going into 2024's growing season. So this morning here on Friday, our all hazards weather map isn't showing too much. We do have the winter storm watches out for parts of like the panhandles here getting into Mexico and Colorado. And that's where honestly we're expecting to get some snow out of this. It's going to start here in the high plains and then move toward Missouri. But if we get a good look at maybe what we might see out of it, by Sunday, as that system evolves farther to the east, we do have the risk of getting some strong thunderstorms in the south that could begin to work their way over toward us. But most of this upcoming weekend, we're just going to watch a frontal boundary stall out over the Appalachian Mountains and stretch all the way back to Texas. I just played you through Friday. Not a whole lot in Ag South territory. Where's the front by Saturday morning? Well, it's here. It's pushing up against the Appalachian Mountains in the Blue Ridge, but it's not going to get over. So most of the start or the end of this weekend, the start of the weekend, is drier for us. Here's where that frontal boundary is going to stall out as the deeper low begins to form over the panhandles this weekend. Now, could we get some showers in by Sunday? Sure. We may especially get them up here in parts of Virginia, northern North Carolina, and then back west. But the big event we're going to wait on is still brewing over the Red River Valley of the South by Sunday midday. So we'll just watch that front sag toward us over the weekend, giving us chances to get some rain. But it'll be the evolution of this system we're going to keep an eye on. So to see that, I want to flip over and show you the GFS versus the European model. Now let's just get to where we were. This is now here on Sunday. So see where the front sagging on Sunday in both models? That's 6 a.m. playing through the day on Sunday. It's going to try to get over us. And then we're going to get a little bit of rain out of that. Not a whole lot, but some. And then we're going to press into Monday when the low curls up and delivers our chances on Sunday night into Monday night of showers and thunderstorms. Now take a look at the model differences here. By Monday, we could be much, much wetter in the GFS solution versus the European. The European rips the system through faster, brings snow to parts of the mid-Atlantic, and not the mid-Atlantic, forgive me, the interior of New England, I think is what I should say. The mid-Atlantic being right into this area, only the GFS wants to bring snow to that region. So we see the system curling through, and it's out. Now next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're waiting on the atmosphere to reload. So you have a little bit of precip coming through this weekend, then the bigger push early next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's not a whole lot of action going on as high pressure settles in. We have to wait on the reorientation of the jet stream. But what could we get in the next week? Well, this is a look at the European model solution, and there's decent chances of us getting 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches of rainfall out of this. The GFS, I'm sorry, that's the European. The GFS is much more aggressive on the rainfall in parts of Alabama and South Carolina. And if you'd like to see the difference between the models, take a look at that. When you look at this map, these colors represent where the GFS is wetter by these amounts, and this represents where the European is wetter. So the European model is wetter south. GFS is much wetter in the interior. So we just need to keep an eye on these model differences, but what's probably wisest to do here is to really look at what's driving the differences. Now, before we do that, Remember, the snow stays away from us. Yeah, there'll be some in the panhandles. It'll rip right through this part of the Mid-South, but I'm not expecting there to be much snow to talk about, of course, as the mild air still invades our region. So to see the reasoning behind this, can I show you the ensemble forecast? Just to prove that we're not going to be able to dip into enough cold air to get snow out of it, this is the probability over the next 4 days, 5 days really, to see snow. All right. What I want to do next is I want to flip back to the previous model run, and I'm going to look at the probability of getting an inch out of this. So now let's go out there 10 full days. There we go. And we're going to see the chances of grabbing an inch of rain. Now these are pretty good probabilities, 70 to 90+% chance, with the highest being here because we hit it with 2 systems, not just the later one. If we step this up to 2 inches, we actually have, across parts of Ag South territory, a pretty good chance, somewhere in the 40 to 50, 60% chance of getting 2 inches of rain in the next 10 days. And watch as I take you from day 10 and include all the way out there to day 15. Do you see how it's increasing? What's changing during that time period is that the subtropical jet is coming back. No polar jet to speak of really, but the subtropical jet is. So we're still in this wetter regime, and I'm watching to see if we can increase moisture chances in this area. Now what's keeping us there is the MJO. It's stalled out in phase 7 for a while. It's expected to collapse. And this is going to do 2 things. This is going to reinvigorate the subtropical jet, which I just drew for you, and it collapses into null space rather than jumping way out here into phase 8 and 1. It also limits our chances of getting really cold air. So take a look. After Valentine's Day, 16th, 17th, and 18th, this is going to start to show back up. The strongest flow stays south, and that is why our week 2 forecasts show wet. See this? In all 3 models. Now, could we be drier in the Mid-South and interior? Yeah, I think the models are pretty good on picking that up. But with a strong subtropical jet, we just kind of tend to get a more southerly storm track. We tend to not be able to tap into really cold air, and it tends to just be active with just moisture during winter. And that's kind of been our story all along, hasn't it? Let's talk about the temperatures before we stretch it out into the longer range. This is today's highs on Friday. Watch the warm-up we have coming this weekend. There's Saturday into Sunday. A lot of 60s and cracking into the 70s here over this weekend. When the low comes out on Sunday in the panhandles, cold enough to snow there. But does that colder air really get to us? Well, by Monday into Tuesday, we just knock back our temperatures to average, 50s towards 60s for highs. And I don't see any real connection with really, really cold air, kind of like I was worried about when I was giving you forecasts at the end of January. Because the day 5 through 10 forecast, still closer to average. And even the day 10 through 15, I don't see any more of the strong cold anomalies for this area. We're just not able in the models to support all of that really, really Arctic and cold air to get unleashed out of Alaska and make it to us. So with all of that being said, can I kind of give you a reason why? Even though we've kind of perturbed the Arctic air with a couple of big ridges, those are normally the sequence of events that say pump out the cold air. Well, we have troughs that flank North America. Now you're going, what does all this mean? Well, do you remember the last time we had all the Arctic air get in? This is when it just poured out of Alaska, came straight down to the southeast. Well, when that happened, take a look at this. We had ridging here and ridging there, 2 of the things we need to have happen. But the trough was anchored in the middle part of the country. You say, well, why? What's the difference? Well, back when that occurred, the MJO was sweeping out of phase 1, 2 into phase 3. It's currently here. And what that supports, just to bring this to full story, is it supports troughs that flank North America, one here and one here, not any centered in North America. Now, it's not a really, really hot forecast, so don't think that, but it's just limiting the ability for the cold air to really get into place. Now, let's spend a moment discussing longer term stuff. Here we go. This is what I wanted to dig into. This is the new forecast from February 20th to March 20th from the high-res European model. And it has gone back over wet, in fact, very wet, down in southern Georgia into Florida. Reason for this? It's trying to just continue to keep the subtropical jet coming through like that, those 2 arrows. We tend to be drier here. And what's amazing about this is that if you look at the position of the forecast for most of March, which is what I'm showing you here, it lines up very well historically with what we get. You see, I plucked out every year in March when we had an El Nino, either moderate strength, strong, or very strong. And we currently have a strong one. So looking at all these analog years, we tended to be wetter right in here, drier there, and wetter on the back side. We tended to favor cooler than average conditions, but you're saying, well, how much? Well, over the month, it's really only projected to be maybe a degree Fahrenheit colder than average. So that's why I labeled this cooler, not cold. All right. So again, look at this map and then go back and show you what the European's saying. Looks very, very similar, doesn't it? So the question is, well, how does this evolve into April? And I'm going to be very, very clear with you. There is an El Nino. And in April, if you look at all of those analog years and try to predict what April precipitation is going to look like, they're a mess. April is the least predictable month in the calendar year, and it's because it's a transition month. But I want to make a case for you here as we try to get toward the end of this video. El Nino is this event. It is slowly fading. We need to watch the Atlantic Ocean temperatures and the temperatures here and here. And I'm going to present a case for you as to why you should watch these three areas just as much as you watch the El Nino region. So is El Nino fading? Yeah, it is slowly. Very, very slowly. There was its peak, and it's just doing this. So how long is it going to take to fade? Well, there was a little bit of misinformation, in my opinion, put out there, not by NOAA, but the interpretation of NOAA's forecast, and it's right here on this map. What you're looking at with this graph, is this was just issued yesterday, and it's showing you in red bars the probability of keeping El Nino, and in blue bars the probability of going to La Nina. And you notice that spring, April, May, June, July, the highest probability is in so neutral. Now, the misunderstanding is in the height of these blue bars, because many people look at this and they assume something about the strength of La Nina's return. And that's not what this is designed to forecast. It's designed to forecast the chance. So it's just saying, hey, it looks like as we get into summer and then fall, we're going to get out of this regime of El Nino and possibly push our way back into some form of La Nina. Now, I'm going to make a stink about this because I think it's the speed at which El Nino fades that's critical to us understanding what it's going to do. So can you watch this with me? One of NOAA's models, called the CFSV2, is taking our current position as El Nino and by spring, crashing to neutral, and by summer, full-on strong La Nina. Now, because of that, it is attempting to do this. It's attempting to take the atmosphere and build it into this big omega block. We tend to be okay if that happens. We do. All the heat and drought tends to come into the middle section of the country. So if there's an epic collapse of El Nino, it is not yet right now a major red flag for Ag South. Nearly everybody else, yes, it is. I mean, look at the big ag belt of the country right here in the midsection of the country. That's major risk. But we have to ask the question, is this consistent with other models? So can I show you what other models are showing? This is the May, June, July forecast from the NMME. The N in that stands for national. And what it's predicting is La Nina showing up while there's still warm water here, warm water there, and warm water here. Now, what does all that mean? If La Nina shows up in summer and this stays warm, I am very concerned about the hurricane season. But that's beyond June and July. I mean, that's next August, September, October. I just need you to know that. But if this water here goes mild, while this stays mild, El Nino and La Nina here kind of gets overridden. And the latest update from the NMME, the National Multimodal Ensemble, says if there's drought developing, it's Central America into this part of Texas, New Mexico. We're wetter. That's March, April, May. What about May, June, or April, May, June? Still a wetter signal. What about May, June, July? Still a wetter signal. Now, are the models good? Should we trust them? We got to ask that question. I'm going to try to answer it for you in a second. But before I do that, I need you to see the forecast from the European model, beginning in April, going into May, June, July, and August. It, too, is developing La Nina signals. Not as strong, though, but this is still warm, that's warm, and that's warm. Now, what's the point behind me telling you that? Well, the European model, if I come in here and look at the United States and flip this over to precipitation forecast, let's do this here, and take you back, this is what it's got for March, April, May. Wet, just like the NMME. This is what it's got for April, May, June. Wet, just like the NMME. Where's the drought coming from? Central America into Texas, New Mexico. This is what it's got for May, June, July. Still a wetter signal. And then we really have to watch June, July, August for the tropical season to get going. That'll be a big wild card going forward. Now, with all that being said, what I think is going on here is a couple of things. The first thing that I think is happening here is that if we look at what El Nino might say about June, July, August, it's not giving us a strong signal. So I used all those years, which had El Niños in winter that slowly faded to neutral or La Nina by summer and fall. Okay? And we look at them and you're like, whoa, what's going on? Well, I don't know. If you look at any of these individual years, they do not hold strong correlation for June to August. So I'm going to tell you something. We got to do this. Toss it out. Because this El Nino has its own flavor. Now, what is that flavor? That flavor is going to be a competition between ocean temperatures of the North Pacific versus the equatorial Pacific and the Atlantic. Now, the map I'm drawing on, though, is just to make a point before I give you that flavor, okay? What about last year? I want to show you how bad the models did with this last year. In February, forecasting for April, May, and June, the models were wet here and dry there. What actually happened? Well, first, what about the European? Little drier in the interior, but wet all throughout this area. This is what actually happened. We were much above average in spring precipitation, especially into Georgia, and bone dry here, which means last year you would have been more wise at this point in the year to use the opposite of what the model said. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I just showed you that both the European model and the NMME want to paint a picture where if there's a drought signal, it's coming up here, and most of our territory stays wet. Why are they doing this? The reason the models are doing this is because of the ocean temperature pattern. Now take a look. The biggest risk for us going over dry is if the North Pacific gets colder and colder and colder. Now, if it does that, if the North Pacific temperatures get colder and colder and colder, we tend to have this kind of inverse relationship with it, and we tend to have a drier risk. Whereas much of the rest of the country, wait a minute, I'm so sorry. I got that wrong. Strike what I just said. I'm not going to edit it out. I want you to know I said that wrong so we can see it. Can I rephrase this? If these temperatures get hotter and hotter and hotter, not colder, 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 but hotter, 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 we tend to find a risk on the downside of precipitation. So drier. It tends to be wet in the Midwest. It tends to be wet in the plains. You say, why? Well, that tends to produce high pressure right here. Opens the Gulf when we get lots of rain in here, but we tend to miss us. But what about going a bit farther south of there? What about this area? If we look at the correlation there, I'm going to show you the PMM, Pacific Meridional Mode, and we're going to create a plot. Now, if that area gets warmer, we tend to do okay. We tend to be on the wetter side of average. In fact, most of everyone west of the Rockies does. So what I'm saying here is that if you look at the other parts of the ocean and the ocean temperatures, we have to pay attention to the split in the Western Pacific, off the west coast of the United States and the Eastern Pacific. Man, I got to get my directions right today. Between this, and this. Can I summarize it for you? If this goes warm, our drought risk goes up. But at the same time, if this goes warm, it tends to wash that out. El Nino plays a backseat to all of this. And the last point I want to make for you here is that the warmer water here means by late summer into fall, tropical systems could get cranking. Now, if you were sitting there and your head is spinning, I want you to know that mine is too. I cannot paint for you a solid picture. What I can tell you, though, right now is that everyone is going to go back to that figure that shows how quickly El Nino ends and La Nina begins and just start telling everybody to prepare for disaster. And that is not what we should be doing right now. We should not be looking at this assuming something that we can't solidly form a picture on. So why did I bother to do this if it paints a confusing picture? Because we have to start somewhere. And over the next several weeks, we're going to build this narrative up to see what we do in spring and how it transitions into summer. That's my plan for you, okay? But I need you to know that right now, the forecast models look wet. But you know they didn't perform well last year. Are they onto something this year? I think they could be, only because they're more consistent together than they were a year ago. So at this point, my worry meter is not bouncing off the charts. Quickly, can I tell you about South America? It's raining in Argentina, and it's going to continue to rain in Argentina. This is the very beginning of the wet episode that's going to come into Argentina. This is the last 14 days. It only started raining here again recently, which means they went through about 12 days of heat and drought. The northern growing areas where they're trying to harvest soybeans and plant corn, they've had decent rains. The safrinha corn crop is going in under more ideal conditions. Where's it drier? In southern Brazil. And that's what the forecast holds. Near normal rains for a big growing area in the center west getting over to the northeast. The dryness you see here, I'm not overly concerned about because they're trying to harvest a crop. Same thing down here. Very wet into Argentina, though. That's going to really provide a lot of relief after about 10 to 12 days of heat and drought. Now, what we're going to watch is this area right here going into our spring, their fall, because that area has shown up drier in April and May in most of the forecast models. And if it is drier during that time frame, it will impact safrinha corn. So there's a story in South America brewing. I'll keep you up to date on that as well. Appreciate your extra time. Hopefully now that you have the weekend to watch this, you've got a little more time to take it in chunks, but this is what I'm caring about right now. So we'll talk again soon. Thank you.